Okay, this is a response to Lawnboy's Post 1975's video on what are your 10 favourite Megadrive games. And this was really hard. What I tried to do was to just, go from gut instinct and not take too long. And yeah, you were right, it's not something you can do instantly. But nevertheless, I've got this down to 10. So let's start with Thunder Force 3. So this is a shoot 'em up, and again, Japanese game. Tend to like my Japanese games, but this one didn't come out in Europe. It came out in the US on the Genesis, but there was no Megadrive version over here. So this is the Japanese copy. Really good game. I chose this above Thunder Force 2 and Thunder Force 4. I thought Thunder Force 2 was a good game, but the series did develop as it went along. But for some reason I thought the gameplay was better in this. I think that the first level on Thunder Force 4, I really like the way the parallax works and the way that it really shows off the hardware. But I just thought the gameplay was better on this. I didn't like the later levels on 4 quite as much. So 3 is a fairly clear winner for me. So again, another Japanese Megadrive game, shooter, and this is Hellfire. Again, really good game. It's one that I did play back in the day. A friend of mine owned the Japanese copy, and I had a Game Genie and used to borrow it and play it with that. Again, it's another shooter. It's got this great mechanic that you can vary your your gun to shoot forward and backwards, up and down, or diagonally. Difficult game. It's a tricky one because the more power-ups you collect, the faster your ship gets. But if you get too fast, you can't control it. So you've got to be careful not to be too greedy. But again, a really good game by Messiah, who is one of my favourite Megadrive developers, who also made this. Gengoon, which is another Megadrive Japanese shoot 'em up. This did come out in the West. Hellfire did as well. Very odd style game. It's quite early. What's the date? 1991. So yeah, the console had been out a couple of years in Japan by that point. But this was one of the games that was held up by Mean Machines, early 90s, as being one of the best games as shoot 'em ups. I think we had a lot coming out at the same time, and there was Hellfire, Thunder Force 3 and Gengoon. So I would agree with Mean Machines that these were some of the better shoot 'em ups that came out. Very strange game. You can see from the artwork here, or the screenshots as well, strange kind of zombie, dead-like bio enemy things, but it's not a horror game. Very, very strange enemies, and you've got tiny little sprites for your player character, but the backgrounds have got all these strange rotation effects, so it's quite impressive for the hardware. It's just really fast and a lot of fun. So, Strider. So I'll agree with Lawnboy on this one. This is a really, really great port to the hardware. It's not arcade perfect, but it's really good considering it's such an early game. And again, Japanese artwork's fantastic. The European one, not so good, but the game's exactly the same over here and in the US on the Genesis. Again, port of the arcade game. It's sort of a platformer, but you've got this... it's kind of odd to describe it. It's a platformer, but it just feels a bit different, a bit more solid. You've got to play it a little bit slower, a bit more strategically than maybe an 8-bit style platformer. So yeah, really good use of the hardware and a good early 16-bit game. So another platformer, Castle of Illusion. Again, the Japanese copy. One of the early Megadrive games, and out of all the Mickey Mouse games and Donald Duck games, Disney games in general, this is the one that I prefer. I prefer it to World of Illusion, and I prefer it to Mickey Mania and Quackshot. Great graphics. I would say that the Megadrive really had two generations. There was the games that came out before Sonic and the games that came out after Sonic, and this was just before Sonic. I think graphically the benchmark was higher, so I think developers had to try a lot harder after Sonic came out. But this was one in that pre-Sonic generation that really did look good, and great use of the colour palette on the Megadrive. So where do we go from here? So these are European games. So PAL, Megadrive, Castlevania. This is, I believe, it's when the license restriction from Konami for making NES games or Nintendo exclusive games ran out. So we started getting Konami games on the Megadrive. So this is Castlevania New Generation. It feels a little bit, compared to the SNES games, this felt a little bit more dated. Not in a bad way. It feels more like the old NES games versus Super Castlevania 4. A bit more traditional. Again, they're trying to make good use of the hardware, and it's got all these fake rotation effects and strange scanline effects to get reflections in water that kind of move around. Really impressive game, and I think they were just trying to make a game that you couldn't do on the NES hardware. Yeah, really good game. I'd recommend playing this if you can. And so the other Konami game is Probotector, which is trying to remember what it's called in Japan. I think in the US it's called Contra 4. So it's it's Probotector is Contra. I forget what it was called in Japan. Contra something something. Is it Hardcore? I think they call it Contra Hardcore. Yeah, really good game. Again, they're trying to compete with the SNES game Contra 3. And obviously the Mega Drive doesn't have Mode 7 or anything like that, but they're trying to do impressive things with the hardware. So visually it's not quite as good as the SNES game, but it's a lot harder. And I don't know if that means that it's less enjoyable. I mean, you certainly got to practice it, but I would say this is probably a little bit harder than the SNES game. But yeah, really good game. If you like Contra 3, I'd recommend playing this. So the last three. Now these were difficult to pick. Megalomania. So I was trying to think about games by Psygnosis and Sensible and I couldn't say Konami, Codemasters. But I went for this, Megalomania. This is a port of the Amiga game. So again, I have to be careful and say, well, am I restricting myself to Mega Drive exclusives, or could it be a port from something on another platform? And I thought I'd go with this. It is a port, but it's a fantastic game from the Amiga. Top-down strategy game. You've got a number of zones, and you've got to develop your tech tree faster than the enemy. But you've got to manage your resources so you don't put all your resources into tech and don't defend your castle and then get destroyed. So you've got to be quite strategic. But yeah, really good game. Didn't play this as a kid. This is one that I got more recently, a couple of years ago. And I remember seeing this and just not understanding what the game was at the time. And it just stuck in my head. And one day I just went back and just had a look at it and saw it on eBay and bought it and loved it. So there you go. So the other one, sports game, PGA Tour Golf, the original. I played this back in the early 90s and really enjoyed it. It's got a battery backup in it, which still works, so I might have to replace that at some point. So PGA Tour Golf is 3D. It's quite impressive. It's very quick to load the courses, whereas 96 was very impressive for 3D, but you had to wait while it drew, kind of rendered each shot for when it moved the camera around, which isn't great. But I would say out of all of them, this is my favourite, probably just because it's the one that I've played the most. But it's a nice, relaxing golf game, and for me, I don't think they got much better than this. So the last one, maybe a slightly controversial one, is Universal Soldier. Now, this isn't considered a great game, and it was panned when it came out, but the game is a port of Turrican 2, and Turrican 1 came out on Megadrive by the Code Monkeys. I think it was published by Ballistic and Accolade, but the Code Monkeys did the port over here in the UK. And when they were porting the sequel, they got the license to Universal Soldier and switched the sprites around, kind of redrew them. And they took out the shoot 'em up levels and put in these extra platforming levels, which are not so great, but it's Turrican 2, and I really enjoyed that game, and it's great to just be able to put a cartridge in and play Turrican 2 immediately without loading it up on the Amiga from floppy disks, which is probably just laziness on my part, but if you want a quick blast, it's a good game. So yeah, cardboard box, so they're quite hard to get hold of in good condition. So that's 10. It was very difficult to pick 10. I ended up with about 18 to start with, and I had to whittle it down. So the other games that I'll quickly say are Road Rash, the first game, further music on this, and I think it scrolls a bit faster. So the graphics engine's really impressive, and the two Psygnosis games are Lemmings, which is a port of the Amiga game, really good on the Mega Drive, even with a joypad, and it's really good in 2-player. And the last one's Pugsy, and it was a choice between Pugsy or Wiz and Liz, and I went with Pugsy. I just like the puzzles in it. Graphics are really nice. It's got a bit of FMV at the beginning. There is a Mega CD version of it, but there's not much difference. I think there are a few more bosses with some sprite scaling and I think some extra levels, but essentially it's the same game. So, yeah, so that's it. So that's my top 10 Mega Drive games. So hopefully there's something new that you haven't seen before, or maybe your top 10 is fairly similar. So yeah, I'll leave it there. Thanks for watching.